Your birthday is coming up, someone casually asks, "So, what are you doing for your birthday this year?" And you give the answer that somehow confuses everyone. Nothing, it's just another day. Immediately the room gets weird, friends assume something must be wrong, family members look at you like you're being dramatic. And society, quietly but clearly, sends the message that if you're not posting cake photos, blowing out candles, or celebrating loudly, then something inside you must be broken. But what if that assumption is completely wrong? What if choosing not to celebrate your birthday doesn't mean you're sad, antisocial, or disconnected? What if, in some cases, it actually says something deeper about how your mind works? Psychologists have spent decades studying human expectations, emotional patterns, and social rituals. And surprisingly, the reasons some people stop celebrating birthdays often have far more to do with psychology than personality. In fact, there are a few very different paths that lead people to that simple sentence: "It's just another day." Let's start with the group that rarely talks about it openly. These are the people who didn't stop celebrating because they wanted to. They stopped because, over time, life quietly trained their brain not to expect much from that day anymore. Back in the late 1960s, psychologist Martin Seligman introduced a concept called learned helplessness. His research showed that when people repeatedly experience disappointment they cannot control, the brain begins to adapt. Instead of continuing to hope for a different outcome, it gradually stops expecting the reward altogether. This isn't weakness, it's efficiency. Your brain is constantly trying to protect you from unnecessary emotional pain, and birthdays, believe it or not, can become powerful triggers for expectation. Think about how birthdays are usually framed when we're young. They're supposed to be special. The day when people remember you, the day when friends show up, the day when you feel important. But when reality doesn't match that expectation once, maybe it stings a little. When it happens again, it stings more. And when it repeats year after year, something subtle begins to change inside your brain. Neuroscientists studying dopamine discovered that our reward system doesn't simply respond to good things happening. It responds to the difference between what we expected and what we received. If the outcome is better than predicted, dopamine rises. If it's worse, the brain adjusts its future expectations downward. So eventually, some people stop expecting anything from their birthday at all, not because they stopped caring about themselves, but because their brain quietly decided that expecting less hurts less. When someone calmly says, "It's just another day," sometimes that sentence carries years of emotional math behind it, but that's only one group. There's another group of people who skip birthday celebrations for a completely different reason, and for them, it has nothing to do with past disappointment. Their brains are simply too busy. Psychologists sometimes describe this as time blindness. It happens when someone becomes deeply absorbed in projects, responsibilities, and long-term goals. Days blend together, weeks move quickly. And suddenly the calendar becomes less about emotional milestones and more about deadlines and tasks. For people like this, birthdays don't carry emotional weight because their attention is focused somewhere else entirely. They're thinking about the next problem to solve, the next idea to build, or the next step in their life path. It's not that they're avoiding celebration. It's that their brain categorizes the date as non-urgent. Right next to that dentist appointment they keep rescheduling and the long to-do list that never seems to end. To outsiders it can look strange, but inside their mind it feels perfectly normal. And then there's a third group that often confuses people the most. These are the individuals who fully remember their birthday and still choose not to celebrate it, not out of sadness, not out of distraction, but simply because they don't feel the need. Psychologists who study motivation often refer to something called self-determination theory. According to this research, the healthiest form of motivation comes from within rather than from external validation. In other words, some people reach a point where their sense of worth isn't tied to rituals, applause, or social confirmation. They've learned something important about happiness. Celebrations can be fun, but they're temporary. Attention fades, the cake disappears, the photos get buried in a camera roll, and the feeling people were chasing quietly returns to normal. Researchers sometimes call this pattern the hedonic treadmill. It's the tendency for humans to chase bigger and bigger moments of excitement, only to quickly return to their baseline level of happiness afterward. For some individuals, realizing this changes how they approach life. They stop waiting for one day a year to feel appreciated. They stop expecting external events to define their value. Instead, they build a quieter kind of stability where self-worth exists whether anyone is singing a birthday song or not. Ironically, this can make other people uncomfortable. Because if someone doesn't need a celebration to feel valued, it challenges the assumption that everyone depends on the same signals of approval. But there's one more layer to this story that rarely gets discussed. Not everyone who avoids their birthday is doing it from strength. Sometimes the decision comes from protection. Imagine a child waiting for their birthday to arrive. They count the days. They imagine the moment everyone gathers around them. In their mind, it feels magical long before it even happens. But when the day arrives, reality might feel quieter than expected. Maybe fewer people showed up. Maybe someone forgot. Maybe the excitement never matched the picture they built in their head. Children often don't express that disappointment out loud. Instead, they adjust their expectations silently. Next year, they hope a little less, and the year after that, even less. Psychologists studying memory have noticed something interesting called the anniversary effect. Emotional experiences linked to specific dates can echo through time, resurfacing in subtle ways every year. So when someone distances themselves from their birthday, it isn't always about the present moment. Sometimes it's about protecting themselves from an old emotional pattern they'd rather not revisit. Another psychologist, Jennifer Crocker, studied something called contingencies of self-worth. Her work suggested that when people tie their value to how events unfold, they can become extremely cautious about situations where expectations might fail. In those cases, opting out of celebration isn't freedom, it's safety. If nothing is expected, nothing can disappoint. That's why the real question isn't simply whether someone celebrates their birthday or not. The real question is why. For some people, it's the result of past experiences that reshaped their expectations. For others, it's because their focus is directed toward bigger goals and responsibilities. And for a few, it reflects a deeper sense of independence from social rituals altogether. Each path looks the same from the outside, but internally, the meaning can be completely different. So the next time someone says they're doing nothing for their birthday, it might be worth pausing before assuming something is wrong. Sometimes that answer carries quiet resilience. Sometimes it reflects a mind too focused on building the future to stop for a single date, and sometimes it comes from someone who already understands something many people spend years chasing. That feeling of being whole doesn't have to wait for a celebration. It can exist on an ordinary day, a random Tuesday, or even on a birthday that passes quietly without candles, songs, or announcements. Because in the end, a date on a calendar doesn't define your worth. And realizing that might be one of the most freeing things a person can learn.